Was there once a man who flew his Ford Pinto across California? And was the James Bond Aston Martin really dumped into the Atlantic Ocean? We've all heard these wild folk stories about classic cars, and most of them are hard to believe. So in this video, I'm going to definitively get to the bottom of some of the world's biggest car stories and expose whether they're true or false. Through extensive research I've done over the past year and a half, I'm finally ready to blow the lid off of 10 outrageous stories about cars and either verify it is true or knock the bottom out of it once and for all. True or false? A 100-year-old Bugatti was found at the bottom of Lake Maggiore? Yes, that's true. And there's proof. The story goes that in 1934, Grand Prix driver René Dreyfus lost it in a poker game to a Swiss playboy. But when the playboy tried to cross the border back into Switzerland with the car, he was unable to pay the high import tax for the vehicle, so he just gave it to the Swiss officials, who rolled the Bugatti into the bottom of Lake Maggiore, which shares a border with Italy and Switzerland. Other people say that poker had nothing to do with it. The car was initially owned by Roland Bugatti, the son of the founder of Bugatti, and Roland crashed the car into the lake in 1935. Either way, 74 years later, in 2009, a group of divers retrieved the rare 1925 Bugatti Roadster that sat submerged at the bottom of the lake, and they sold it at auction to raise money for charity. And that car today is in a museum. The car is on display in its rusted out, sunken condition. It was bought in 2010 by Peter Mullen of the Mullen Automotive Museum for nearly $400,000. And you can go see it today, on display, where it's kept in a dimly lit room, recreating the bottom of the lake. Did Bonnie and Clyde really write fan mail to Henry Ford? There's a rumor that the notorious crime duo Bonnie and Clyde once wrote to Henry Ford thanking him for making a fast getaway car. Is it true? Maybe. It is true that on April 3, 1934, Henry Ford received a letter from a man claiming to be Clyde Barrow, aka Clyde, and in the letter it states, "Dear Sir, I tell you what a great car you make while I still have breath in my lungs. I only ever drove Fords when I could get away with it." You see, Ford introduced a single-block V8 engine only years before, and Bonnie and Clyde famously drove a 1934 Model 40B 4-door Deluxe V8 sedan. The car was faster than most police cars at the time, making it the ideal getaway vehicle. So between that and the fact that he wrote the words "getaway," I personally believe that Clyde thanked Henry Ford for helping him stay ahead of police. So I guess the question is the letter authentic? Well, go see it for yourself. It's on display at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. True or false? Two men turned their Pinto into a plane and flew it around California. The answer is true. In 1971, two aerospace engineers, Henry Smolinski and Harold Blake, wanted to make the world's first flying car by attaching wings, an engine, and part of the fuselage of a Cessna Skymaster to a Pinto. They called it the Miser. They had a vision that one day people could drive their cars to an airport, connect it to an airframe, and just take off. The first flight was done on August of 1973. The Pinto, the Miser, got off the ground, but the wing detached on the right side and it crashed into a bean field. Still, photos of the test flight circulated, and they were soon contacted by California car dealership Galpin Ford with pre-orders for Flying Pintos. It was even rumored that they got a call from the makers of the James Bond franchise wanting to use it in the film The Man with the Golden Gun, where bad guy Scaramanga would use it as his getaway vehicle. The proposed cost to buy a Flying Pinto? $114,000. But all of this was pointless, because on the third anniversary of the Pinto's release, on September 11th, 1973, those two aerospace engineers took to the skies to test it again. They were airborne for 2 minutes, reaching an altitude of 800 feet. Before the wings buckled, the Pinto separated from the airframe, and they were plunged to the ground, dying on impact. We all know that the Ford Edsel was a marketing failure when it was released in 1957. Named after Edsel Ford, the only child of Henry Ford, who passed away of stomach cancer in 1943, the name didn't connect with the public. During its development, the car was called the E-Car. E as in experimental, as the car was built with new concepts and engineering. But when the Ford Motor Company asked its ad agency to come up with some names for its new, very special project, they were having trouble. So they asked their employees to submit possible names, offering the winner one of the cars. Well, there was a frenzy, with over 18,000 names submitted, including some decent names like the Pacer, the Ranger, and the Maverick. Overwhelmed, the ad agency decided to take none of the employee ideas and instead asked a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet named Marianne Moore to submit name ideas. She came up with names like the Mongoose, the Intelligent Bullet, and the Utopian Turtletop. The executives at Ford hated all of them, and with the release day approaching, the brass took it upon themselves to come up with the name. It came down to 3 final options: Droth, which was Ford spelled backwards, Benson, which was Henry Ford II's son, or the Edsel. True or false? A wealthy oil baroness was buried in her Ferrari. The answer? True. On May 19, 1977, Sandra Eileen West, a Beverly Hills socialite and widow of Texas oil tycoon Ike West, was buried in a grave with her favorite powder blue $20,000 car, a 1964 Ferrari 330 America. She was buried at the Alamo Masonic Cemetery after a crane placed a massive box into a grave measuring 19 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 9 feet deep. You see, when Sandra West died of a prescription drug overdose, it was in her will that she be buried in a lacy nightgown next to her husband and in her Ferrari with the seat slanted back comfortably. 40 years later, the grassy patch that covers this bizarre woman and her cherished Ferrari is visited by thousands of history buffs and sightseers each year. Did a movie director break the land speed record in a rocket car? The answer? No. In 1979, Hal Needham, who was known as Burt Reynolds' best friend, roommate, and director of Smokey and the Bandit, joined forces with Budweiser and Stan Barrett to break the supersonic land speed record. The vehicle was the Budweiser Rocket, basically a missile on wheels. 3 wheels with a stabilizing wing attached to a liquid fuel rocket. Hal did a test run and realized that it wasn't fast enough for a land speed record, but if the weather conditions were right, it could break the sound barrier. So on the big day, Stan Barrett got behind the wheel. U.S. Air Force radar data from the attempt was used to estimate the speed of Mach 1, or 739 miles an hour. Barrett and Needham both claimed to have verified the speed and heard a sonic boom, but not a single bystander has ever corroborated that account. To this day, no organizing body recognized this attempt as a record. But Burt and Hal took their claims to Hollywood, where people believed them, and that's where this false rumor started. By the way, if you want to know more about the life of Hal Needham and his massive impact on car chase movies of the 70s, check out my video on him on my channel. Was James Bond's Aston Martin stolen and dumped out of an airplane over the Atlantic Ocean? Stolen? Yes. Dumped in the ocean? No. The car in question is Sean Connery's 1963 Aston Martin DB5 that was in both Goldfinger and Thunderball. Here's what happened. After appearing in those movies, it was put in storage for many years and eventually sold to a collector, who sold it to another collector who put it up for auction at Sotheby's. It was finally bought by a real estate millionaire who moved the car to a hangar in Florida. But that's where the story gets weird. In the middle of the night, in 1997, Bond's original Aston Martin DB5 was stolen from his hangar in the Boca Raton airport. The thieves tore the gate from its hinges, cut the alarm, and fastened a chain to the car's axle and dragged it away. Now, many people claim that the car was on its way to the Middle East, but it never made it, speculating that it was dumped into the Atlantic Ocean to collect the insurance money. It was insured for over $4 million. But last year, in 2022, it was found at a private residence somewhere in the Middle East. It's likely that the current owners who bought it don't even know that the car was stolen all those years ago. Or do they? Did a famous dancer die when her scarf got caught in a Bugatti? Yes. Isadora Duncan was a dancer in Europe in the early 1900s, but she wasn't a classically trained ballerina. She was one of those free-spirited bohemians who danced barefoot, wrapping herself with scarves and togas. But her life, as it came to cars, was tragic. In 1913, her 2 small children drowned when the car they were riding in plunged over a bridge and into the Seine River in Paris. But the curse of the automobile would eventually take her life too. In 1927, in Nice, France, she was strangled when the enormous scarf she was wearing got tangled in the rear hubcaps of her open car. She was a passenger in a brand new convertible sports car that she was learning to drive. As she leaned back in her seat to enjoy the sea breeze, her enormous scarf somehow blew into the well of the rear wheel of the passenger side. It wound around the axle, tightening around her neck and dragging her from the car onto the street. She died instantly. Did a Chrysler concept car really fall off a luxury cruise ship? Yes, it did. The car was the Chrysler Norseman, a futuristic concept car that was built in Italy in 1956. At the time, Chrysler kept details about the car's engine a secret, describing it as a special advanced Chrysler engine, and the Norseman was on its way to the United States to make its debut at the 1957 New York Auto Show. However, in the late-night hours of July 26, 1956, about 40 miles off the coast of Nantucket Island, almost to New York, the Italian luxury ocean liner, the SS Andrea Doria, was in heavy fog and collided with another ship. 51 people were killed and the entire ship sank. Chrysler never remade the car and scrapped the concept altogether. In 1983, a team of divers discovered the wreck of the SS Andrea Doria and were able to recover a number of artifacts from the ship, including the Chrysler Norseman. The car was found to be remarkably well preserved because it was transported in a special crate. Today, the Norseman is a valuable piece of automotive history, and it's often displayed at car shows and exhibitions around the world. Finally, did a NASCAR driver really race with a monkey? Yes, he did. And the monkey's name was Jocko Flocko. In 1953, NASCAR driver Tim Flock wasn't having a good season. And then one day, he came across a rhesus monkey when he was at an Atlanta pet shop. He thought the monkey might bring him luck. So he bought the monkey and he named it Jocko Flocko. Tim Flock put the monkey in the car with him when he raced at NASCAR. He and his team built a little seat for Jocko with a harness and even went as far as getting him his own little helmet and uniform. And on April 5th, 1953, Jocko Flocko became the first monkey to ever compete in a stock car race. Tim Flock would have his monkey by his side for the next 3 races. However, tragedy struck at the Raleigh Speedway when Jocko escaped from his harness. Extremely shaken, Jocko started going nuts in the car and started clawing at Flock. He had no choice but to hand off the monkey to his pit crew, and he lost the race. Sadly, after that incident, Jocko had to be put down. Well, that's the video, folks. And if you're interested in more wild car tales like this, let me know in the comments. I got a lot more stories that'll blow your mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.